Next item, old business, consider accepting Morningstar Ministries settlement proposal.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Councilman Bowman.
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules and immediately move into executive session to discuss contractual matters related to the Morningstar settlement.
Do we have a second? Second discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, we're going to break and go into executive session. We'll go down the hall and let everybody sit here so not everybody has to get up and move.
I'm not going to read it word for word, but I'm going to cover it, follow it fairly closely to what's been provided to the council. Morningstar Ministries indicated in their presentation on the 5th, on March 5th, they purchased the property in September 2004. Shortly thereafter, the Region Park Planned Development District was proposed, which included Morningstar's property, and that PD, or Planned Development District, incorporated a commitment that the tower that was named the Tower Hotel at that time was going to be demolished within 2 years of rezoning approval. York County finally approved this rezoning request on January 10th, 2005, and therefore at that time there was an obligation for the tower to be demolished on or before January 10th, 2007. As Morningstar indicated, they did begin restoration efforts on some of the other buildings in 2005. However, this work did not include the tower itself, nor was it done pursuant to the current development agreement, which was not in effect or even contemplated at that time. In fact, as was indicated, I think, in Morningstar's presentation, initially they viewed the tower as being unrepairable. Though the tower was to have been torn down by January 10, 2007, this didn't happen. Morningstar subsequently approached the county and requested the second chance be given the building in the form of a 5-year extension in time, in which they pledged to renovate and transform the tower from its original planned use as a hotel into some living units, condominiums, life units supporting the church's mission. A development agreement embodying this second chance opportunity was negotiated with the county and signed in January 2008. The development agreement, as they indicated, did call for a final completion of the tower renovations over a 5-year period, but it also included a series of interim milestones which had to be achieved. One of those specifically designated milestones required Morningstar to put its financing in place for the tower's renovation within 180 days of the date when the new commercial site plan for the project was approved. A proposed site plan for the tower was first submitted on Morningstar's behalf on December 9, 2008 by Power Engineering Company Incorporated, and after a series of revisions, it was finally approved by the County Planning Department on August 24, 2009. Notice of that approval was sent to the engineer of record on that same day, whose name was Joe Hammond of Power Engineering. During the next 180 days following that approval, Morningstar did not submit any proof or any other documentation regarding financing commitments. They did not contact the county asking for additional time, nor did they provide any report of incremental progress toward meeting this requirement element of the development agreement. However, when that date was reached, that 180 days date was reached, York County did not immediately send a notice of default to Morningstar. Instead, we initially contacted the church and informally advised them that the county believed they were in default of the terms of the development agreement. We told them that we would likely need to send them a written notice of this fact shortly unless they could provide the financial assurances indicated in the near-term future. They responded that they were unaware that the 180-day time period had been running, and they asked the county to grant them additional time in which to secure their financing. However, when we asked them how much additional time they thought would be needed, the church indicated that they couldn't even provide us a rough estimate of that. They weren't sure when financing might be obtained, and therefore they were seeking an indefinite extension of the 180-day requirement. At that point, county staff responded by pointing out that sending them a notice of default did not indicate that the tower would need to be torn down. It only triggered a series of processes designed to cure and correct the problem. We indicated our goal was still to resolve the problem with them, that we're not focusing on demolishing the tower. However, we didn't feel that we could appropriately delay that notice indefinitely, knowing that a lengthy dispute resolution process may still have to be undertaken at a later date. On March 5th of 2010, the county sent a formal notice of default to Morningstar. Morningstar responded with what they called a notice of dispute, claiming the county had been wrong to notify them of the missed deadline. However, there has never been any dispute of the fact that the site plan was approved by the county on August 8, 2009, nor that more than 180 days passed between this approval and the county's notice. Morningstar claimed in its presentation to the council 2 weeks ago on March 5th that there were, and I'm quoting the presentation slides, several verifiable letters of commitment for financing in place at that time. However, no such letters have ever been mentioned, much less submitted to the county. At a later date, Morningstar did show county representatives several letters from potential financing entities who expressed an interest in being considered as a possible lender by Morningstar. However, none were letters of commitment. All the letters we were shown conditioned their interest in providing funding to Morningstar on the church meeting their lending criteria. Yet Morningstar has freely and repeatedly acknowledged to us that they were unable to meet the lending criteria. To this date, Morningstar has never represented to York County that they have ever obtained a true financing commitment for the tower from any financing entity at any time. If they believe that they actually have lending commitment exist now, or they've existed in the past, we'd like them to produce them immediately. No such letters of commitment were included in the pack of materials provided to the county on March 5th. Similarly, we have never been shown documents verifying any commitments to purchase any units in the tower, even though we have repeatedly asked to be shown such documentation. At various times, we have been told there was a waiting or reservation list of persons who had expressed a serious interest in purchasing living units within the tower. We were also told that some or all of those persons had made deposits of up to $1,000 in order to be placed on that list. However, the quoted number of these claimed reservations has varied fairly widely over time, and to this date we have not been shown any documentation to verify any specific number of reservations and or deposits. Morningstar indicated that the county did not respond to their official notices. It is accurate to say that the county didn't send a written reply to Morningstar's letter labeled a notice of dispute. Actually, there is no such official notice. It was just a response to the development agreement that indicated that if either party was alleged to be in default and they disagreed, they should notify the other party of what they disputed. The county made a conscious decision at the time not to respond in writing because we thought this might further escalate the rhetoric. However, the county staff did make a series of visits to Morningstar following receipt of their letter in order to discuss possible resolutions. These meetings were primarily with Vice President David Yarnes, but at least also one that I was involved in involved Reverend Rick Joyner as well. At no time during any of these meetings did Morningstar ever claim that York County had sabotaged Morningstar's efforts to market the tower or that we had effectively halted the project. To the contrary, though Morningstar did complain at times that the notice of default had made their marketing efforts more difficult, they consistently assured the county during these initial meetings that they had an extensive waiting list of literally hundreds of people who had been granted priority in return for their deposit to choose a living unit size and location in the tower. They had the ability to pick how many bedrooms they wanted, the finishes, so on and so forth, and the location within the tower. We were explicitly told that Morningstar felt there were more than enough prospects on their waiting list to make it likely that they could convert these reservations into an adequate number of commitments to buy. Morningstar maintained they could readily meet the lending criteria and secure their construction financing if York County would simply allow the church sufficient time to process the list in order and bring these prospects in to make their selections. However, we were also told the church needed to bring these prospects in sequential order because they had been promised that in the order they made their deposits, they'd get that same priority to pick their locations in the tower. And we were told that many lived out of the area. And therefore, Morningstar said they feared this would take longer than the 60-day cure period specified in the development agreement. And on that basis, they requested York County to withdraw its notice of default pending their completing the process. County staff, I responded by noting that the parties, this was a minimum time. The 60-day period was a minimum time, not a maximum time to cure default on the development agreement, and the county might well be willing to consider extending this period if Morningstar demonstrated they were making meaningful progress toward the goal of putting their finance in place. We indicated we were unwilling to withdraw or cancel the notice of default at that point, but we suggested they immediately begin the process of contacting the folks on their waiting list, seek firm commitments to make purchases within the tower, and document the results to us. And if the trend for converting reservations into commitments showed promise, the county could then consider granting additional time to Morningstar. We also asked them to provide some additional information about the business plan underlying the sale of the units. We had some concerns because in earlier presentations from the council there have been quotes about how these living units were going to be priced. And we have been shown the same estimate of total probable construction costs that they presented to us on March 5th, namely that the tower would cost $51.7 million totally to develop. Although we saw a number of numbers over the course of time about the number of units they anticipate, at that time the most recent information we have from Mr. Yarns was that the church currently envisioned selling approximately 150 units. Actually, the last number I received was 147, although that might depend somewhat on the number of bedrooms requested by various people. This would equate to an average cost per unit of roughly $345,000 in order to fund the $51.7 million, but that was more than double what had been represented to the council as what the asking prices were going to be. When we brought this issue up with Morningstar, we were told that they had made some substantial modifications to their renovation plans for the building, and consequently the anticipated project costs had now been reduced to around $35 million. Morningstar, I asked them to provide some additional information. Tell us about what were these proposed changes, how did you come about the new estimates, and tell us again a little bit more information about the details of the unit purchase prices so we could better understand and verify the financial viability of the project. If there was going to be additional money put in addition to what was being contributed by purchasers, that was fine. We just wanted to see how all this would work out. For several weeks after those discussions, Mr. Yarns reported to the county staff, actually I think most of those times he called me, and indicated the number of prospects they had interviewed and the number of units that had been sold. At the last point where we talked over about a 3-week period, I was told that discussions with the first groups of prospects they had contacted had netted 35 sales commitments, and they were roughly on track to make sufficient sales by the time they reached the end of the reservation list. However, after that discussion of about 35 sales, we never heard any more reports of unit sales and have not to this date. Nor did we ever receive any verifying documentation about the 35 sales that had been made, nor did we provide any further details about the business model or how they anticipated raising the cost of constructions through their projected sales. When those sales reports ceased, we didn't throw up our hands and stop discussions. The county staff scheduled a follow-up meeting with Mr. Yarns, and at that meeting he indicated a dramatic change in the suggested approach for developing the tower. Mr. Yarns indicated he believed the Morningstar needed to explore a new phased approach for developing the tower. He said that he felt it was fairly unlikely that enough units could be sold at one time to finance construction of the entire project. Therefore, he suggested the alternative of constructing the project in incremental phases consisting of 3 to 5 floors at a time. He said that in this way, Morningstar would need far fewer prospect commitments to obtain financing to construct any single phase. And after completing each block of floors and closing on the units that were sold in that phase, the resulting funds could be used to pay off the construction loan for that phase and pave the way to start over with the next. Mr. Yarns said he felt this would greatly improve the prospects not only for a quick start for the program, but the ultimate completion of the tower because funding could be acquired in a number of smaller and much easier to manage units. This not only meant far fewer sales commitments being needed up front, but he felt like once they established the success of the first phase, it would make future phases that much easier to sell. However, Mr. Yarns also noted that while he felt this would allow construction to start much sooner, we needed to understand that the phased approach would likely actually extend the time frame for final project completion because each phase would need to be separately sold, constructed, and the loan paid off before the next phase could begin. And in making that statement, Mr. Yarnes indicated that before the church pursued this option, he needed to know how the county might react. Would we consider the extended time frame for construction if they went through a phased approach? The first thing, I believe David Pettin and I were in these discussions with Mr. Yarnes, and the first thing we asked were some clarification to make sure we were all on the same page. We noted that the entire building would need to meet basic life safety codes before the first phase could ever be occupied. And this meant that while a lot of the floors could be left as simply empty shells during the initial phases, items like exit stairs, at least some of the elevators, and most, if not all, of the building's exterior facade would need to be completed as part of the very first phase, not only to meet code, but to allow the residents in that first phase to be comfortable living there. But this meant that unit sales for the first phase would probably not be sufficient to fully offset all the first phase construction costs. Morningstar would undoubtedly need to invest some of its own money to get the project underway, and that initial investment might not be fully recovered until the project was near completion. Mr. Yarnes said he understood, and that was his expectation as well, but he felt the church could obtain the necessary funds internally to complete the common elements that would be needed for all the phases at the onset. David Pettin and I advised Mr. Yarnes that while we couldn't make any guarantees about council approval, they were an elected body, we believed his proposal was very sound. It offered the ability to quickly complete the building facade to the greatest extent possible and prepare the parking lot for occupancy by tenants, aside from a minimal area needed to stage construction of the future phases. We thought his proposal, his idea, would likely address most of their neighbors' concerns and permit everybody to be satisfied with a considerably longer time frame for completing the subsequent interior phases of the tower. Essentially, the church's investment would demonstrate their concern for the surrounding residents while also maximizing their own opportunity to complete the tower over time. We also were impressed that essentially the church was offering to take on any risk that some of the interior floors wouldn't be completed for many years, rather than that being a risk for their neighbors. At this point, Mr. Yarnes indicated he needed to further review the costs involved. He hadn't yet refined and determined what the best number of floors was to include in specific phases, or how many phases they should do. And he also said they needed to complete an engineering assessment to be certain the existing brick facade could be salvaged in place. And as to that brick facade, this was actually a discussion in an earlier meeting with Mr. Yarnes. Mr. Yarnes had explained to me that the brick exterior of the building had experienced some isolated failures in the past, and there was some concern on behalf of the church that larger portions of the brick exterior might not have been tied back correctly to the concrete superstructure. Yarnes indicated that Morningstar and their engineers had been researching a system that they had discovered where what he described as helical anchors could be driven through the brick facade and into the concrete structural wall behind the bricks at appropriate intervals, and this would ensure the brick was fully stabilized. However, he said they didn't yet know the extent of the problems that they might have with the brick on that particular building, or whether this method would work well for that building. We were told that this was extremely critical in determining how they went forward, because this could potentially make the difference between their being able to retain nearly all the existing brick exterior at nominal additional cost, or potentially having to strip the brick from the entire building and completely replace it. Mr. Yarnes indicated at the meeting he would get back to us soon with further information about the feasibility of that phase plan. However, we never heard further about the phase plan or the brick facade until about 6 months later, when we started talking about mediation. At that point, when communication ceased and with no ready solution in sight, the county first asked Morningstar to agree to mediation in June of 2010. Morningstar initially balked at that request, claiming mediation was unwarranted and unnecessary. It's probably important to note that though they've indicated to the council at the last meeting that they felt that the notice of default halted their operations, At this time in June 2010, Morningstar said that they didn't need mediation because sales were going well and they anticipated that they were on the brink of finishing the project or getting the project financed. However, after extensive discussion and negotiations, a first mediation session was finally scheduled about 6 months later on January 26, 2011. Now, about a week prior to the scheduled mediation, Morningstar made a presentation to the County Council, offering to secure, reattach, or remove loose bricks where feasible and at the owner's discretion, paint exposed concrete to match brick color in order to temporarily conceal it, and to remove stains, graffiti, and visible debris from the building grounds, roof, and exposed interior. They made this offer as a settlement offer in lieu of going forward to mediation. The county rejected that offer and the mediation session went forward. Both parties are prohibited under the mediation agreement from publicly disclosing any discussion that occurred during the mediation session itself. However, as was mentioned at the time, the session was adjourned at the end of the day, and Morningstar was given 30 days to provide additional information to the county. The specific information that they were supposed to provide was, in fact, an engineering assessment of the brick facade along with testing to determine whether the helical anchor system could be used to stabilize the building's brick exterior. Unfortunately, this information that was to be provided within 30 days of the first mediation session has never been made available to York County. To this day, we have no knowledge of the condition of the brick facade and how stable or unstable it may be. On June 23rd of 2011, about 6 months after the first mediation session, and having never received the information, the county did contact the mediator again and asked him to declare an impasse and asserted that we believe no useful purpose could be served by scheduling another mediation session. About a week later, we received correspondence from Morningstar asking that another mediation session be held, but again, it didn't include the engineering study or the assessment of the building's brick exterior. Subsequently, matters of both parties were delayed further as Morningstar hired a new attorney and York County attorney also retired. By the time both new attorneys had acquainted themselves with the file, the mediator suggested the parties participate in a second mediation session. We agreed, as did Morningstar. Again, the discussions during the mediation are confidential. We can't make them public without violating the mediation agreement. However, I can indicate that the overall position of York County staff, and this is a staff report, regarding a resolution has never changed from what was been communicated freely outside of mediation. York County has consistently indicated we believe that Morningstar must make a significant and virtually immediate investment toward fully renovating the building exterior, placing it in as near to final form as is realistically possible. We believe they must finish and light the surrounding parking lot with the exception of an area needed for staging further future interior construction and fully secure the building. We have also consistently asked that Morningstar demonstrate they have secured an unconditional financial commitment to complete this exterior work promptly and that they propose and establish a new timeline for completing the interior in phases or otherwise. The purpose for suggesting this format, the settlement format, is not limited to addressing the concerns of surrounding residents. We also have consistently said we believe the material financial commitment by Morningstar is realistically necessary in order to afford any reasonable prospects for the project's future success. Without such a commitment, there is little reason to believe future results will differ markedly from those in the past. Further, we see no reason for Morningstar to expend funds to make elements of the existing facade, like railings and windows, more presentable when they have indicated these features will only be removed later when and if the building is completed. Finally, we once and for all, everybody needs to be certain about the stability of the existing brick on the building exterior. From a staff perspective, we expected substantially more to be offered toward these requested goals than what was reflected in Morningstar's presentation on March 5th. But obviously, the council is the ultimate determinant of those factors.
Any questions for Jim? We have a motion?
I move to reject the Morningstar Ministries settlement proposal which Morningstar representatives presented to the full council on March 5, 2012 as unreasonable and unacceptable in part for the following reasons. One, the new 5-year term sought is unreasonable and is more akin to a request from a new owner versus an owner for over 6 years. 2, proof of financial capability is unacceptable. 3, scope of work lacks meaningful detail. 4, start date is too remote. 5, press conference in advance of council presentation threatening litigation places a chill on the process and is unacceptable in a meaningful mediation process. Additionally, I would request the county attorney formally request an impasse from the mediator associated with the related development agreement.
Second.
Discussion. Councilman Williams.
Want to go first?
I made a motion.
Yeah,
Speaks for itself.
I agree with the motion, but also I had no desire to tear the tower down, but I also have no desire to keep talking about this every 2 years. I mean, during their presentation, they mentioned reset a couple of times, which I found interesting, especially for reason one that you have there. Although if we're truly talking about a reset, the original development, both agreements had performance measures points in them. I mean, the 2004 agreement that became 2007, that performance wasn't met, so we rewrote that agreement. And when we came to the point for those performance measures to show the financing, Mr. Baker went over the results of that. The biggest problem of this agreement is that the mediator clause doesn't, I know it's in there, but it's not working to resolve the issues. So, I mean, if we were truly looking for a reset, if we're talking about going forward, then there needs to be some teeth to the performance. So for that reason, I agree with your motion. I think that if we're going to do something, it has to be after the last part of your motion, where the mediator declares an impasse. At that point, like I said, I can only speak for myself, but I have no desire if we can spend the same amount of time fighting about whether to tear it down that we can to build it, I'd rather build it. But I don't want to spend that time and then be in the same place we are 5 years from now. So what I'd be interested in, if we want to talk again, Mr. Baker included a lot of terms in there, and there's two that I think are in my mind non-negotiable. The tower needs to be stabilized, including both functionally and aesthetically, as soon as possible, agreed upon, and then it either needs to be built or taken down in the agreed upon time frame. Like I said, I'd like that time frame to coincide with, rather than fighting about it in court. If we can spend that time trying to get it built or resolved one way or another, that'd be my preference. But today, for those reasons, especially the mediators getting the mediator clause in this development agreement we have today dealt with, I support your motion.
Any other discussion? I think the reality is, like Chad said, everybody here would love for that to be successful. I mean, that would be a win-win for everybody. But we cannot go down another 5-year trail of just essentially words, no concrete actions, no solid proposals to deal with. So based on the way the mediation was supposed to go, we don't really have a choice. So question on the motion. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Okay, next item.